2018, and I think we've got quite an easy-ish one this evening, not like last time, which is quite difficult. So let's get on with the business. So just for the benefit of people who may not have been before, the meeting is filmed. It's live streamed, but the film can be watched any time on YouTube. So if you feel there's any exciting parts you'd like to relive, you're welcome to go and look at it. Members of the public do not need to be filmed if they're speaking. And if you don't wish to be filmed, then if you could just mention to Sian here, and we won't film you while you're speaking. Everybody else has to be filmed. So, also, we're not expecting any fire alarms drills, so if the fire alarm goes off, we need to leave by the exit to my right. And again, please do make sure your phones are switched off or on silent. So we'll get the meeting going, and first, apologies for absence. Sian.
From Councillors Harkness, Leach and Fithian. Thank you.
I haven't got any urgent business. Are there any declarations of interest from any of the members this evening? No? Okay. We've no public question this week. Can I have people who were at the previous meeting to move and second the minutes? I'll move it. Councillor Hudson moved. Second, sure. No, Councillor Kumar second. Okay, thank you. So we'll move into the meeting proper. We've only 3 items, as I said. 2 of them have got speakers. So what we'll do, we'll go item 7 first, item 8 second, and item 6 last. So we're going to do item 7 first. This is the Lion Mill. Now we have 1 speaker, Joanne Redford. But before we do that, we'll have a brief introduction from the case officer. It's Graham, and then what I'll do, I'll ask Joanne to come to the table at the front here to give her to address the committee. So Graham.
Thank you, Chair. This is, as it says on there, application for a new industrial warehousing building which could be used for classes B1, B2 and B8, which is either industry or warehousing and distribution. Oops. And this is the site itself. So where the red symbol is at the moment, it's the roof. This is Lion Mill, which is a grade 2 listed mill. We've got some more pictures showing the mill. To the southwest of that is a current yard area, which is quite untidy in the way that it's operated, but there are areas of established planting around the site. And as you can see, south of the site on Penwyn, you've got the access then that leads to a residential area, but with commercial areas to the north and west of the site. This is the existing site layout. So as you can see, the shaded large building, that's the existing mill building, and the yard area just to the bottom side, to the south side, the west side there is the yard area, and just over here on the right hand side is the existing access through into the site, and again you can see the neighbouring residential properties. So these are just pictures of the mill. As I say, grade 2 listed mill, so it's quite a dominant feature, and as you'll see on the elevations of the proposed replacement building, there's regard been given to that in terms of the design of the proposal. The picture at the bottom is again showing the access into the site as it stands at the moment, and the road just going off to the left is towards where the residential estate is. Again, just some more pictures of the site. So this is the main yard area at the top. So this is the area where the building will be located. And the bottom picture is taken from the adjacent residential properties. So again, looking towards the site itself. This is the proposed application. So again, you can see the main mill in the shading at the top. At the bottom there, you'll see this rectangle. This is the proposed additional industrial warehouse building. Now originally this was sited at this position further over to the south of the site, in closer proximity to the housing, and following representations made by local residents and also by ourselves, the design of the scheme was altered to pull that further away. So that also helps because there are existing tree screens around these areas of the site which can be protected and enhanced, and obviously the bulk of the building therefore is at much greater distance from the site. These areas you can see for car parking and servicing will be shared between the new building and between the people that are currently occupying the mill itself, and they're both in the same ownership. So these are the elevations of the building, and as you say, gives the impression of being a multi-storey building reflecting the design of the mill, but in effect most of it is just a single-storey warehouse type building. But obviously we've tried to avoid a kind of modern building which would obviously harm the setting of the listed building. And that again goes back to the site itself. So the main issues that have been raised in connection with the application were those of heritage protection, and as I say, the design, the location of the mill, we've looked at those carefully, and in terms of our policies and national legislation, we consider that this will not harm the setting of that building. Issues associated with impact on amenity of neighbours, again we've taken that into consideration both in the relocation of the building and in the conditions that members will see in the report that control things such as the hours of operation, additional landscaping around the site, and control over noise emissions that may come from the building itself. In terms of access to the site, your highway engineer has commented that they consider it is an acceptable scheme in terms of the impact on the surrounding highway network and in terms of the highway aspects within the site. Members will see again in the report there were objections received to the application, and those are listed in the report. However, we consider that those issues, where they relate to material planning considerations, have been adequately dealt with, subject to the conditions, as I say, set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Graham. Joanne, could I ask you to come to the front, please? Okay, so when you're ready to speak, Joanne, if you just press the button on the microphone, little red lights will light up. You've got 3 minutes, and we'll rudely interrupt you when you've 30 seconds left. And when you've finished, the members may wish to ask questions. So in your own time.
I live at Penryn Avenue in Royton, and I've lived there for some time, since 1999. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of myself and the local residents who have concerns about changes that are going to affect our residential property, our quality of life. When we first all moved in many years ago, there was one site owner who ran the Lion Mill and the yard and kept it absolutely immaculate. So when I bought the property, there wasn't a problem. It was immaculate, it was tidy. Since then, multiple different businesses are being run from the yard area. There are containers, there's been rubbish, there's been fly tipping. The properties which were very close vicinity, as you can see there, all have gardens which face and rear kitchens that face the back of the site there. We see everything, the coming, the going, the heavy goods vehicles. So when we found out that there was a new development, and at first it was going to be much closer to our properties, obviously we were very concerned about what that would be, what it would mean for us as residents, how it would affect our living accommodation. The planning officer at the time had concerns herself, and I think there's been a lot of developments where these plans have now been submitted, and I think it looks like they're probably going to go ahead. The residents that I've spoken to were all of the opinion, is this going to be better than what we've got? Because at the moment it's like living next to a gypsy encampment, if I'm honest. There's comings and goings all times of night, there's heavy good vehicles, there's burning rubbish coming over, there's men who use various areas to go to the toilet because there's no facilities. That's how it is at the moment. So I think what we're thinking is that these plans, obviously we don't really want them to go ahead, but is it going to be better, you know, than what we've got? So our concerns are that the new building goes ahead and there's a lot of noise. outside working hours. I mean, at the moment, the working hours proposed are 7:30 till 6 p.m. and I think a Saturday morning. As residents, I work full time. I'm not always at my house. There are other residents that are retired, and I'm sure it will affect them much more than me. However, on saying that, I don't work weekends. Saturday morning, you know, if there's a lot of noise, if there's heavy goods vehicles coming and going, if there's cars coming and going, stacker trucks, the air pollution, the noise pollution. If I'm outside in my garden on a Saturday morning, I'm sure that's going to affect me and other residents. Possibly we would not buy a property that is subject to so close to industrial development. I know I wouldn't now. If I had a choice, I'd move somewhere different. So what we want to do as best we can is work with Steve and with councillors, with the planning officers, and try and get the best deal possible for local residents, which means fencing is an issue.
Joanne, I'm sorry, Joanne, you've run out of time, and in fairness to everybody else, I'm just going to have to ask you to stop. But it's interesting that we've got a case here where the residents feel that this will improve the life for the better. So you're asking that we have got some conditions here, and quite strong conditions. So is it right that you're asking for the grounds, the buffer to be maintained?
We'd like to see an artist's impression of what landscaping proposals are. We'd like to know about how many vehicles are coming and going, how many heavy goods vehicles. Is it 2, is it 20, is it 30? We haven't got enough information at the moment, and what we want to make sure is that it is a residential area and not living in the middle of an industrial site. So it's noise pollution, light pollution, air pollution. We want to see, you know, possibly what the fencing is going to look like, what the landscaping is going to be, what the trees are going to be. It's going to have a massive impact on residents, and we do have a lot of concerns about it.
Okay, that's probably not something. Is there any of those questions you can answer now regarding the comings and goings of vehicles and the fence?
To take the second one first, in terms of the landscaping proposals, we obviously heard what residents have said about the fence, and the wording of the conditions ensures that that could be an element of the proposal. It links in with some of the other conditions that relate to noise attenuation on the site as well. So, for instance, they would need to do surveys of the area and find out what the current noise climate is and what the potential noise from the building is. Obviously, in order to mitigate that, it involves an acoustic fence, for instance, then clearly that will be part of the scheme we want to put in. But also, as we saw, the landscaping side of things, by moving the building away, it does allow us to retain more of that area, and that's obviously what we will look at in terms of dealing with the condition discharge application for that. In terms of the vehicle movement, that's more difficult for us to be able to anticipate, because at the end of the day, this will be an industrial building on the site, and whereas you may well get one company coming in and operating now, future occupiers may have completely different operations. But the one element that we will be able to control is obviously on the hours of vehicle movements, etc., associated with this new building, which is obviously a bit of a problem at the moment, the way, as I say, you'll have other people putting cabins and all sorts on the site. We have no actual control at the present time over, you know, them coming in at 3 o'clock in the morning and doing that. So there is some benefit, but I can't give you a full sort of guarantee in terms of the actual vehicle numbers in the longer term around the site, just that they will be more confined to what you'd call a working day. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you, John. If you could just turn the mic up, please. Thanks. Okay, Joanne's quite right. The site has been neglected for many years. In fact, 2 years ago, there was a plague of flies that took about 6 months to actually sort out, because somebody had actually dumped pallets full of dirty nappies, and we didn't know what it was until these flies were there. lorry drivers tend to overnight there and people use the grounds as a toilet. So in one respect that will tidy the area up, this building, but residents still need to be protected from noise of moving vehicles, etc. Councillor Hudson.
Planning department, I've considered very seriously the residents' concerns, and I look at these conditions and I think it's as good. We can only vote on the things that's in front of us now. What will happen in years to come, we can't predict and we can't say. So that's why I'm going to move the recommendation, because I think the planning officer is aware of the problems and has done his best to alleviate any of them, the residents' concerns. So I will move the recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hudson. Are there any more comments? Councillor Kumar.
Yeah, just a comment for the weekend opening time. Could we restrict the access of HGV vehicles on the weekend, so that there's no big lorries coming on the weekend?
Yeah, the condition that we've recommended does allow some weekend working, which is the 8:30 until 12:30, so just after lunchtime on a Saturday, and there are restrictions completely on Sunday, bank and public holidays. I think in terms of the fact that this is an established industrial site, it would be a bit too much to take away those limited Saturday hours that have been proposed, but again, obviously that's for members to consider if you consider that a problem.
No, that's not what I was asking. I was asking HGV movements on the weekend. I can understand the hours of opening, but HGV vehicles to stop big lorries coming in on the weekend, as opposed to normal vehicles, vans and stuff.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor, I'm obviously not being clear enough. That is a condition that relates to vehicle movements, so obviously that does control the comings and goings from the site. This is condition 12 in the report, does actually relate to vehicle movements.
I don't think I'm getting through. It's the size of vehicle I'm trying to restrict, if I'm honest. As in the big HGVs, not the actual vans or whatever that need to.
Vehicles are restricted. All vehicles. No vehicles are allowed.
They are on Saturday mornings.
No, yes, but not the rest of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, it's a difficult one to be able to say we could actually control the size of the vehicles. In terms of the vehicles actually accessing the site, again, my colleague from the highways perspective would be able to comment on whether any restrictions in the area on the overall size of vehicles that may be able to get onto the site. But I don't feel that there is a justification for putting a weight limit, for instance, on those vehicles. This is an industrial site. It's a warehousing distribution type vehicle. You will get quite large HGVs serving the site, and to restrict that would probably limit the the likelihood of continued occupation of the premises.
I was just asking for Saturday mornings only, not during the week. Is that possible to do or not? It's a straightforward answer.
Again, it's for members to decide, but in my opinion, it would be unreasonable to restrict that type of access if we're going to allow other activity at that time.
Okay, so the problem is we've actually the case officer Tessa has worked really hard to come up with these, but it would be ideal to do that, but there are risks involved in pushing too far. The ward members are already looking at extending some double yellow lines around the site and creating a definitive right of way onto the site, which currently there isn't. So that's being dealt with outside this. I think what we need to, the conditions are quite good, and I think the planning officer will agree that the residents can be fully involved in the landscaping and the the acoustic fence, etc. So that the residents can be involved in that process and hopefully deliver something that will protect them from the worst case, anything that might crop up. That's correct, isn't it, Graham?
We can certainly make sure that there are notes on that when those applications are received, that we engage with the particularly with the immediately adjacent residents on that. Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we want to encourage new industry, and but we've got to remember that we must protect the interests of residents, particularly those who already live there and are having something. Next door to this is another mill, the bee mill, and they have actually got unrestricted hours in vehicle movements. And my bedroom window faces straight at it. And 5 o'clock in the morning, sometimes the wagons are reversing and moving about, and it's not good. So we don't want that to happen here, which is only a few hundred yards down the road. So the residents have been very reasonable in the way they've dealt with this, and I'm glad to see that the officers have put such strong conditions here to protect them. So I'll work with the residents, and I know the residents will, to make sure that we deliver a scheme that satisfies as many people as possible. So it has been moved. Do I have a seconder for it, please? Okay, it's been moved and seconded for approval with all these conditions, which we will be looking to enforce. Okay, all those in favour? Okay, that's approved. Okay, thank you. If you want to sit through the rest of the meeting, you're quite welcome. If not, we'll move on to the next item, which is the Gorse Mill, with 2 speakers on this. We've an objector and we have the applicant. So could I have an introduction to the Graham?
Right, thank you, Chair. So this is an application, I mean, to some extent similar to the other one in terms certainly of the use and the type of developments. This is another employment generating proposal, this time at Gorse Mill, Gorse Street at Chadderton. It's just down off Broadway, close to the motorway junction. So this is the site boundary itself. I apologise, it's not very clear, and therefore I've done the aerial photograph, which gives you a clearer view of the site as it was in the not too distant past. So this is Broadway down at the bottom of the site, and the access to the site comes in either through this direction or off Gorse Street, which is to the south of the site, which is the main entrance to the site. As you can see, previously there was some natural vegetation that had grown on the site, and a former lodge as well, and all that area has now been cleared, as you'll see on the later proposals. This building at the top end of the site, and again we've got some pictures of that, is Ram Mill, and you'll probably hear a little bit more about that and the relationship to the mill. But what's important at the moment is that there is this particular access which cuts through the site, which currently serves Ram Mill, and there are proposals to put in a alternative access to that, which will come around this direction. Another element that might be mentioned is that the claims of there being a pedestrian right of way through this site, but as members will see on the late list entry, that's not a definitive right of way. So these are just some pictures of sites. This is Gorse Street, which is quite a wide street, already serves some commercial premises before it gets to the main road junction. And as you go down to the bottom end of the site, you come to the boundary of the site, and this is Ram Mill itself at the other side. So as you can see, this is the area itself viewed from that direction. This is from the opposite direction to the other entry into the site, and this is the access road that would currently take you through to Ram Mill. And again, as you can see, some activity has already taken place within that area of the site. A lot of clearance taking place, infilling of the mill lodge. So this is the car parking area down at Ram Mill. Another view of that showing again the cleared area of the site. So this is the proposal itself. So as I said, as you saw on the previous view, there was this existing access cuts through the site. The proposal is to put in an alternative access which will cut around the top end of the site, and that will allow for HGV access to and from the site to be obtained. There's an area of yard here at this point, which would be served from that access point. The main building itself occupies the central area of the site, and then there is an additional service yard area which will be served off Gorse Street at the bottom end of the site. This is the building itself. Unlike the previous application, is more of a modern contemporary type structure, but given its setting, and there has been a recent approval for a similar building just to the west of the site, this is considered appropriate in this location. Again, primarily a single-storey building, but with office accommodation on the upper floors as well. The issues that have been raised, and again you'll probably hear some more of that, in terms of the impact, particularly on Ram Mill, in terms of the access to the site. Some of the issues surrounding the work that's already taken place on the site, particularly the infilling of the lodge and the obstruction of the claimed right-of-way. But realistically, it's the planning considerations which members need to focus on. Firstly, this is a site within a primary employment zone, so this is an area which is deemed suitable for this type of use, and as I say, as is surrounded effectively by uses of a similar type. There are no objections from the highway officer, subject to a financial contribution towards the Scoot traffic management system, which relates to the junction onto the main highway. So again, we're asking members to resolve to grant permission subject to that payment. Some of the other issues about the site, particularly in relation to drainage issues on the site and the infilling of the lodge, which have been raised. Members will see that there is a condition requiring details of that scheme to be submitted. Your drainage engineers have looked at that scheme, and subject to the final details and clarification of some of those details, have not raised any issues in principle with the site. There are some issues that have also been claimed about rights of way across the site, but again, these generally relate to private matters which are outside the control of the council. Similarly, the right of way which has been claimed, there is legislative alternatives for pursuing that if it's considered there is evidence of such a right of way, but as I say, it's not on the definitive map, so it wouldn't constitute a reason to object to this application. So there are a number of issues that are set out in members' report, and some of those are highlighted also in the late list item. We are recommending approval of the application subject to conditions and subject to the Section 106 agreement for the financial contribution. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And so we do have two speakers down. Do I have an objector and somebody to speak on behalf of the applicant? So you, sir, right, so I'll invite the objector first to come and address the committee. Sir, if you could just go to the table at the front. As with the previous speaker, you have 3 minutes to speak, and we will remind you when you have 30 seconds left, after which the members of the committee may wish to ask you questions. So when you're ready, sir, if you want to just press the red button, and off you go.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I represent Messrs Akbar, who are the registered proprietors of Ram Mill, and Messrs Akbar have very serious concerns about this application. You will all have the additional representations which have been probably provided to you today, I believe. And whilst a number of these have been considered, and we do appreciate that the planning officers have considered these representations and have added an additional condition 11, we do still feel that there are substantial concerns with this application. If I take you through these in turn, number one, the existing vehicle access to Ram Mill is, as proposed, very, very dangerous. There are approximately 50 HGVs coming into the site every single day. Access is not safe by any means, and not adequate by any means for the safe operation of the site. Bearing in mind there is an adjacent school, and bearing in mind there's adjacent McDonald's and supermarket, both of which are very, very, very busy, as well as a busy lighting mill. HGVs will have to reverse probably, given the inadequate access and the sharp 90-degree turn. I repeat, 90-degree turn for articulated lorries numbering 50 per day coming into this site. There is also a proposed car park with access issues, and I'm sure highways will probably have some representations as to that, but we do not feel it is adequate by any means whatsoever. There are a number of also environmental concerns raised by the environmental health officer as well. There is no banksman on site, no water tank to clean the existing construction vehicles, and there is already material developments being carried out on site as if planning permission had already been granted. There are also issues with the levels and the access. There was previously a historic reservoir on the site, which has already been infilled, representing a material development. We do not know the quality of that infill. We do not know where that infill has come from, but we know that the reservoir has been infilled. And that reservoir was an existing soakaway for the site, and approximately 500, what we think 500 wagons have come in and already filled in that site. As a basic minimum, we would suggest that there should be another phase 2 study carried out to assess the level of that made ground and see whether it was adequate for development. We are not in any way against development, but we suggest further conditions and further investigation needs to be carried out, and possibly, and what we would recommend is a deferment of this this planning application. Conditions are not adequate. In particular, conditions 6 and 10 and 5 are not adequate, given given the ownership issues of the site as well, because the applicant does not own all of the site, even though on their application form they have represented that they do.
Thank you. Thank you. Right. Do we have any questions? No? Could I just ask, you mentioned, you talked about 50 HGVs per day.
Yes.
Whose HGVs would those be?
They're HGVs servicing the existing business at Ram Mill.
So the Ram Mill takes 50 HGVs a day? 50
HGVs a day. It's a substantial business being
So how
operated
will
by
that be
Ram Mill.
worse? How will that be made worse? If there's already 50 coming now?
What we're saying is the proposed access into Ram Mill.
So that leads me to the next question, which I'll ask the officers about the 90-degree turn. We'll deal with that when we discuss the actual application. Are there any more questions? No? Okay, thank you very much, sir. Thank you. I'll invite the applicant's agent to speak next. Again, so you've 3 minutes. I'll remind you when you've 30 seconds.
Thank you, Chair, members. I'm here to speak on behalf of the application. I think as the officer's report thoroughly sets out, this is for a major industrial development within one of your priority regeneration areas, and unlike the previous site, it's not one that isn't hindered by residential development. It's a very sort of area where you want to deliver jobs and investment and growth. It'll bring a major plant hire business to the borough, who are inward investment from outside the borough, bringing over around 300 jobs ranging from office jobs to maintenance and on the site. So it's a really significant investment in the borough. Issues were raised just now through the objectors, and in particular I think access was the main one raised. You'll have noticed that condition 10 on the permission, the proposed condition 10, is a Grampian condition which allows for the rerouting of the access into Ram Mill. We've set out proposals how that can be achieved in a two-way movement for HGVs, how that can be achieved, and you'll note that that has to be achieved and delivered prior to any development taking place to ensure there is continual access to Ram Mill. And I think that's a very important point, is that it's a condition which will come back to officers for discharge, and the Highways Authority will clearly want to thoroughly make sure that it is fit for purpose, safe and suitable, and that will be within your control to grant discharge of that condition. So there are other issues have been raised about environmental issues. as is typical on sites, there'll be construction management plans to deal with construction of buildings, and contractors work to considerate contractor contracts as well. So those issues will be addressed and can be addressed as matters progress. In terms of other forms of access, as the officer set out, there are no rights of way across the site, so other forms of access are private matters which are not material to your planning decision. They're matters which there are other avenues for those to be dealt with. And in terms of the drainage point, I understand from my clients that drainage amendments have been made, and how local councils, drainage officers, and as well as highway officers are fully satisfied with all the information that has been submitted. Therefore, from what we see, is we strongly urge you to support the application to secure the investment, and we're more than happy with the conditions posed, and we'll work closely with officers to provide the necessary information to ensure they're discharged adequately to protect the interests of Ram Mill and other nearby occupiers. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any questions? Yeah, Councillor Kumar.
More an observation than a question, really, but just to say, really, a thank you for taking into consideration other traffic users by your willingness to fund the scoot system and pay for 5,300 quid.
Thank you.
Okay, that's an observation, not a question. Are there any more questions? Any questions? No? Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, so for the members' benefit, could I ask the case officer just to be absolutely clear that there are a number of issues raised as objections which are not planning issues, which are civil matters to be decided outside this committee, and there have also been concerns raised about the environmental services. Again, those are issues to be considered outside this committee. Can I just have confirmation that that is indeed the case?
Yeah, I'll just ask Wendy in a minute to just give some commentary on some of the highway issues that were raised. But part of the importance of the late list item that members will have seen was to run through some of the comments that have been made. These are genuine concerns, we fully appreciate that, but as members will know, we can only determine applications on material planning considerations, and it's not the role of the planning system to protect one private individual's interests against another. Nevertheless, where that public interest comes into play, in particular in relation to protecting the access to Ram Mill, we have ensured that through the condition that those controls will be put into place, so that although some work has been done on the site at the moment, the condition makes absolutely clear that no obstruction of Ram Mill's current access can take place until the alternative facility to an acceptable standard has been put into operation on the site, and obviously would need to be retained thereafter. So in terms of that, there are obviously, if the objector has claims of private rights, then clearly they have their own separate controls, but as a planning authority we have taken that seriously, and we'll make sure that those elements are controlled. Similarly, in terms of the concerns that were raised about drainage and flooding on the site, again, those details we will be looking very carefully at ensuring that adequate provision is in place. And in fact, the scheme that has been submitted so far does include on-site storage facilities, underground storage facilities, as part of that drainage scheme to deal with the loss, for instance, of obviously previously open areas where you could obviously get drainage into the ground. Many of the other issues, as I say, and they're set out in the report and the addendum, are matters which are outside the control of the planning authority. So therefore they're recognised, but they're not material to consideration in this application. I'll just pass over to my colleague now, just a few comments on the highway issues.
Regarding Jardine Way, it's currently an unadopted highway, but it's regularly used by HGVs accessing the other mills in the area. We received the drawing quite late on in the process showing the proposed access for Ram Mill. It doesn't contain enough detail for us to say it's acceptable, so a condition's been attached, and it won't be discharged unless and until we're satisfied that the construction of the new access road and is acceptable, and that vehicles, including HGVs, can make the movement safely. So we won't accept anything that isn't acceptable to the local highway authority. With regard to vehicle movements, both TFGM and I are happy that there won't be a significant impact on the local highway network, and if the revalidation of the scoot system is carried out, TFGM are quite happy that there won't be any significant impact on the local highway network.
Okay, so they can't do a single thing until you're satisfied that access, and that's quite right. It'd be unacceptable to leave the Ram Mill without any access at all. I've got three speakers of Councillor Hudson, Councillor Davis and then Councillor Brownridge. Councillor Hudson.
Objections. This is an area where it's traditionally been mills and place of employment, and we've got to weigh up the fact, I'm sure the planning officer, looking at these conditions, they've taken everything into account, and that's why I'm quite certain we've safeguarded most of it. And at the same time, we must welcome 300 new jobs, because without jobs, there'll be no new houses or anybody will have any income. So, Chairman, I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davis?
Thanks, Chair. The objector made remarks about all the HGVs coming in and out of the site, and he mentioned about the school. Now, I don't think they have to pass the school, do they? Because the school's got different access. Can they confirm that, the traffic people, please?
Yeah, what we could confirm on that is that at the moment the adjacent school, all the access comes from further up on Foxdenton Lane, so there's no current access to the school which is used from which would affect the access to Ram Mill or to the existing or to the proposed premises on site.
Yeah, so the vehicles aren't actually passing the school premises when that it's not a danger to them. So
no, there is a boundary to the extended school grounds, but no, there's no current effect.
Chair, I might be able to help Councillor Davis a bit. I think the issue is that you're right in saying that currently there is nothing that runs past it. But there have been some negotiations around potentially extending the school and coming in, if you like, on the site that's sort of behind Lidl there. The problem that you have with that, Councillor, is obviously you can't consider that because there's nothing in application in it. You can only consider it on the basis of what you've got, and the consequence of that is you have to consider it as is. And of course, you're entirely correct. There is only one access into the school, and it doesn't mean the HGVs don't currently go across it. So it is something to keep in mind when we obviously perhaps potentially come onto the extension of the school. But at the moment, you can't take it into account.
Thanks.
Thank you. Can I just have some clarification? The applications for a distribution warehouse, the applicant's agent referred to a plant hire business. So could I just have some clarification of what we're actually being asked to approve? And if it's the latter, do we need to have any additional conditions? There could, presumably will be a lot of external storage associated with plant hire. There aren't any conditions about external storage. So if you could just clarify, please, Graham, that would be very helpful.
Okay, the application is originally submitted obviously for a B8 distribution warehouse. Yes, we're aware that there's a potential occupier of the site. I don't consider that operation, how that type of business operates, would be materially different from the approval that we're granting. So it wouldn't necessarily fall within B8, although it is questionable. It is a storage area. There are elements, obviously, of distribution in terms of, obviously, the equipment that they hire out, moving on and off the site. In terms of the conditions that we've got, clearly the condition 6 does relate to the accesses, turning areas and car parking and other parking areas within the site being maintained for those purposes. So there is an element of control. If members wish that they needed that to be bulked up in some way, that it's specifically related to external storage, then quite clearly that is something we could look to. It is, the open areas in the site are quite extensive, so that's not something that we saw as being a particular issue, but it is a relevant, it's obviously a relevant consideration if that was considered appropriate.
If I might just add, Chair, I think it is, for simply that you don't want it to become very unsightly, because that could impact then on the ongoing character and attractiveness of Ram Mill. So we don't want to take away from their successful business by creating something unsightly right in front of them. So I think we could perhaps, or I would be grateful if you consider putting something on about keeping the site in a neat and tidy condition, something much more technical than that I'm sure you can come up with, but basically to protect the sort of environment of Ram Mill as well, because if they've got a prestigious business there, they don't want it to be devalued by having lots of JCBs standing about in an ugly fashion, do they? Not that I'm saying that they would, but you know, we could just control that perhaps.
Just thinking about that in terms of how we'd word a condition, as I say, there's quite some extensive open areas on the sites. I don't think we'd want to say you can't have any external storage, but we could obviously impose a condition that requires them to specify where those areas of external storage were on the site, and obviously we'd then try and ensure they weren't in prominent positions, and if they were, that we ensured there was adequate screening of those areas. If something of that nature was what council had in mind, then clearly we could work something up on that.
Yeah, I think that would be very acceptable, thank you.
Councillor Kumar.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think of that before, so well done, Barbara. But yeah, I just second the recommendation as printed, with the addition of that condition.
Okay. Any other contributions? Okay, just coming back to the work that is being done at the moment and the filling in of the reservoir, while they obviously are affecting the site at the moment, how do they affect how we look at this application this evening?
There's obviously been some work that's been carried out on the site which would strictly have required planning permission, may well also require a licence from the Environment Agency, and we're currently liaising with the Environment Agency on that particular issue. It was a comment that was made earlier on about the material that may have gone in the reservoir. There is a condition on the site that requires an assessment of contamination on the site, but I think it's currently limited to landfill gas elements of it. It may be appropriate to continue to extend that a little bit to cover contamination in a more general sense on the site, so we can ensure that we get those details of the surveys of the areas that have been infilled as part of that investigation.
Okay. Is there any more comments or questions to the officers? It has been moved and seconded for approval, so can I have a show of hands for approval, please? That's unanimous. Okay, thank you. So that application is allowed, and we'll move on to our final application of the evening. Item number 6, outline planning permission for out apartments. This is already, we've already had permission granted for this site, haven't we? Can we just have a very quick run through for the benefit of the members?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a variation to a scheme which committee have previously dealt with and approved subject to a legal agreement for financial contribution. The reason why it's coming back to members is that the developer has now found a potential occupier of the site. This is the site itself. The blue area you'll see on some photographs currently being developed as well. There's some residential properties at the rear of the site. That's the site itself. This is the new building on the adjacent site. This is the proposed layout. So this is a single building towards the front of the site, communal car parking areas around the back of the site. So obviously it's been sited with good separation from neighbouring residential properties. The amendment effectively is that the new occupiers will provide services for people with in particular with physical disabilities, so they're required to have a lift installed that will allow access, stretcher access to each of the floors of the building. And in order to do that, it's actually involved an increase in the overall height of the building, and that be accommodated within the new layout. In terms of the relationship to the houses at the back though, it still remains effectively a two-storey building, so although the overall ridge height will be higher, it's at quite a substantial distance away from those houses. So that realistically is the only change to the proposal that members have previously dealt with on the site. So a slight increase in height of the building, but we consider that impact, both in terms of its design and relationship with neighbouring properties, is still equally as acceptable. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, well, unless anybody's got anything they want to add, I'll move approval. Okay, all those in favour? Again, unanimous. Okay, thanks. That's the business for this evening. Can I ask you to note 5 appeals, all rejected by the... which... And particularly the one, the Manchester Road one. But let's not get too excited about that. Anyway, thanks everybody and have a great Christmas, and we'll see you in January. Thank you.